what happened to you?
So in 2018, I was working for a think tank in London, a non-partisan international development think tank, and I got interested in sex and gender, that dangerous subject, and I started paying attention to it for about a year before I tweeted or said anything. I sort of really wanted to understand, like, what the hell is this? Am I a bigot? You know, is this as obvious as I think it is? And then in late 2018, I started tweeting about it. I also, it was when the government was consulting on bringing in self-ID, so changing the Gender Recognition Act to make it easier for people to change their legal sex. And they were asking for people to respond to the consultation. So it was a public policy question. I worked at a think tank. It was a think tank where people could have all kinds of views and disagree on all sorts of things. And so I talked about it at work in relation to the government consultation. I shared a booklet about the consultation, and some people complained. A bit of the story. So I was based in London, but the headquarters of the organisation I worked for was in Washington, DC. It was people in Washington who complained, and then it escalated from there. I lost my job, and I took my employer to employment tribunal in 2019 on a belief discrimination case. And this was important because, so in UK law, the Equality Act, you're protected against discrimination on the basis of age, sex, race, disability, and so on, and what they call religion or belief. And so if you have a religion, that's a sort of brand name thing. It's obvious what a religion is, but a belief, a philosophical belief, basically it has to be like a religion. So it has to be something that is kind of serious, that affects your life, that affects how you live, that you're not going to give it up. And then it has this criteria that it has to be worthy of respect in a democratic society. So basically, if your belief is in Nazism or fascism, that's not protected against discrimination. But if your belief is in Scottish nationalism or ethical veganism, for example, it is. And so there was this question of, does the belief that men are men and women are women and that matters and it's important, is that protected as a philosophical belief?
I want to sort of leave that as a, let's see where that goes. It's one of those things that we read about in the news, what happened to you, and you go, oh, that's a person and that's a thing that happened. But we don't actually necessarily empathize with what was going on for you. When your contract wasn't renewed, you weren't able to work because of your belief. When did you first realize that was going to happen, and how did you feel in that moment?
So it was not long after I started tweeting about the topic. I got an email from HR in Washington, and I was I still thought it would be all right at that point, because the culture of the organization was we argue about stuff, and it's quite a small organization and people have different views. And so I wrote back to the, it really wasn't a big organization. So, even the HR guy, I thought, oh, well, he'll be interested in the topic. And so I wrote back to him and I sent him a couple of things to read. And I said, you might not be aware this is an issue in the UK that the government's consulting on. I sent him something by Kathleen Stock. I still at that point thought, oh, well, this is normal. This is a normal issue that's controversial. We'll be able to talk about it. And then over the course of the next 6 months, my life kind of unraveled. But it took 6 months, of investigations. They got in consultants to look at my tweets. And all that time, most of the people within the organization I was talking to either agreed with me or agreed that it was a reasonable position to hold, that there could be different views on this, and so it wasn't until March 2019 when I had a conversation with the big boss, and he basically said, it's too controversial, it's too difficult, we're letting you go.
Wow.
And I I recorded that call, which you're not supposed to do, but I did, and obviously I used it in the tribunal, because at that point I felt like, I'd lost all trust with the organisation, and so I have that recording, and I've only listened to it twice because my lawyers made me listen to it, and it's quite upsetting. I was saying in that call, all I'm saying is the definition of sex in the Equality Act, in law. It was this really Kafkaesque situation. I was saying the law in the UK protects people against discrimination on the basis of sex, male and female, and on the basis of gender reassignment, whether being transsexual or trans. So I was, giving the definition of the law, and this is what I was losing my job for. That was deeply, that was dark. And then, because as you say, it was my contract wasn't renewed. I wasn't given a P45 because I didn't have that sort of, straightforward a job. And I had no idea that I had employment rights at that point. So, what do? I tweeted about it. And there were some feminist lawyers who had sort of dreamed up a case like mine before I even existed. They were waiting for a belief discrimination case.
Wow.
And so they kind of arrived like the fairy godmothers and said, we think you've got rights.
Wow. Did you ever imagine you might be at the centre of this kind of hoo-ha, particularly involving J.K. Rowling?
No, that came completely out of the blue. That was, that came after I lost in the first instance. So the first thing I had to do was put the claim in, and then the next thing I had to do was crowdfund for the money to pay for lawyers. And so most of that money came in £20, 20, 30, £50, thousands of them, while I was sort of sitting on my sofa in my pajamas. It was amazing. And then there were a few more larger ones, and every time a large one came in, we'd go, oh, that was J.K. Rowling.
Really?
Yeah, because, she'd already tweeted something about it and then deleted it and called it a senior moment, and so we had a kind of suspicion that she was sympathetic. So it was a joke, but it was like, oh, that one must be from J.K. Rowling.
How high were those?
Oh, just like thousands. I mean, and I don't think they were, but that was kind of the joke.
It might have been her.
Yeah, it might have been her. It might have been her. But never reached out to her or anything. And didn't expect it at all. So when I lost, which was at the end of December in 2019, I had this one day of despondency, and then the next day she tweeted about my case and kind of sent it around the world, and it all went haywire.
Wow. Is it Rowling then? Not
Rowling. It is Rowling.
Bloody hell. Rowling, Bowie, all the real debates here. Were you a Harry Potter fan?
I'm not of the age to be a mad Harry Potter fan, but I read it to my kids, and I've seen all the movies, and so I'm a fan, a kind of ordinary fan, not a mad fan. Yeah,
I was a huge fan, I would love to have her on the show one day, but she doesn't really do interviews, unfortunately. Is J.K. Rowling a transphobe?
Depends how you define it. I don't think so, but I think trying to say, some people are transphobes and some aren't, on the spectrum of people who are gender critical, people who say that men are men and women are women. You can say it as politely as you like and as carefully as you like, and you'll still be called a transphobe. So, so I don't think it's helpful to try and say, well, J.K. Rowling isn't and I'm not. But, these people who are, less careful about what they say are. I mean, clearly, if somebody's attacking people in the street or, trying to have trans people lose their livelihood, that's transphobia. But saying in clear language, which is not what people want to hear, that someone is a man, that's what gets called transphobia. Yeah. And J.K. Rowling wrote this essay several months after she tweeted about my case, and she set out in such careful, just kind, thinking of everyone's rights, and she was still called a transphobe. So
That's right. I feel like we could still say, okay, well, this person's a transphobe because, as you say, they're trying to prevent somebody who represents as trans from doing their work, or they throw stuff at them in the street, or they just say, I hate those people because of who they are, or whatever. That to me seems like that's where a transphobe is. So the idea that you or K Rowling might be just seems absurd.
Right. But I mean, I've read a definition of transphobia that says even having that conversation, the conversation that says, well, this is transphobia and this isn't, that in itself is transphobia.